Share more safety advice in recognition of Fire Safety Week. As the colder weather approaches, a lot of us are on the verge of turning on our heaters and maybe cozying up to the fireplace. However, there's some words of caution to share this year. As meteorologist Tim Cha explains, the ongoing drought conditions pose unique fire risks, but following some safety recommendations will help you stay safe during the colder months.
As we continue into fall and temperatures drop, fire safety becomes crucial, especially areas in a drought. While the area has seen rain from the remnant low of Helene, it's still not enough to eliminate the drought. As the current weather pattern keeps us on the dry side, Captain Chris Brown says the concern continues to rise, just like the fire risk in the fall fire season.
Just this time of year, especially as dry as it is, the leaves are falling, we really have to be more careful. Even just a cigarette butt being thrown out can cause a big fire.
This is one of many triggers that can start a fire in these dry conditions. While Graham says house fires don't normally cause wildfires, fires can spread quickly, especially with leaves providing fuel on the floor of the forest. It's why experts advise double-checking those furnaces and heaters.
Make sure that you buy one that's UL tested, and please follow the directions. Don't put it right next to drapes or furniture. I think it's usually keep it 3 feet away. Have your furnaces maintenance. Have maintenance people come in and check them out, make sure they're safe. Be sure and change your filters on a regular basis. Keep them clean.
Safety checks also apply to those who want to stay warm by a fireplace.
Just make sure your chimneys are cleaned out every year. Be sure and empty your ashes. Just really be mindful and don't leave it on while you're away from home because it could be really dangerous.
With these tips in mind, residents can proactively take steps to ensure their safety this fall. Remember, it's not about just staying warm, but also staying safe. Here for you in Beckley, West Virginia, I'm Tim Cha, WVVA News.